G'day, and welcome to Mark and Sam After Work. Today I've got this new rifle, which I've just about, well, I have put together. It's not quite complete. There's a little bit of setting up and finishing off to do, but this is our, right at the moment, our 300 Norma Magnum. What it really is a custom chassis made out of bits and pieces I've got from, or that Gareth at GCPD has sold us. We did a good price on some bits and pieces. So a chassis receiver piece, which was not a discontinued part or a part that wasn't going to be used. And then I've made bits and pieces with his forend, his latest buttstock on. Had to modify everything to make it work, with the main key ingredient and the star of this little show is the Barnard PL action or PLC action. Really strong action in the Lapua bolt face. So it's going to let me test various cartridges in the Lapua bolt face. So that's what I've got there. This is actually a right-hand bolt, left-hand feed, so left-hand port. Really nice action, but had to build a custom chassis system to match up to it. Got my forend, made all this, there's a bit of welding and all sorts of stuff, lots of work I've done there. I've got a few snapshots I'll try and put in there of that, but largely a pretty intense, a lot of work to make all that happen. And then I've got a Madco barrel in a 30-inch barrel with one of my custom new tapered big thread muzzle brake on the front of it. So nice big thread on there, so really done really thoroughly, and we're testing the 300 Norma. Sitting on top, it'll run various scopes, has a 60 MOA rail from Barnard. They do a 60 MOA, and then I've got my Night Force 7x35 in the second focal plane sitting there on the top there, but we'll run various scopes on the top of it, and there's a bit more to talk about that. You see I've got my bipod system on it. As I said, lots of work to get this great action in here. Had to machine it out on the inside, build up a block for a recoil lug in there, machine out the whole back of it so the actual bolt could action properly inside here. So all those bits and pieces were lots of work, and the joy of making a custom thing, building your own action and bedding and all that sort of stuff to make it go inside there. But I'm very happy with what we put together. We've got to go out and shoot it. I said it's partially finished. I've obviously coated it. This has actually worked out a different colour than I thought it was. This was going to be platinum. It looks more like drab olive green. So whether it stays at this colour or not, I don't know. But it is finished. As you can see, I've actually welded through here to weld this whole extension out the front to run my bipod system on the front here. I've got that so it's full clearance. It should be able to run without any problems. I've got 46mm bore clearance in there, so I can run a 41mm barrel in the structured barrel, which I hope to run into this with this rifle in the 33 XC. And I think everything else is pretty much, it's the Barnard trigger in there. The whole lot has come together as to something that I really like the design of. Lots of machining on this receiver block to take everything, but otherwise everything pretty much, with a bit of modifying to accept the bolt, everything pretty much accepted up here as to what I'd hope it to. So should do really, really well in the way of testing the platform. So at the moment, the 300 Norma. All I've done at the moment, I have actually fired 4 shots. That's in this thing here, the 4 shots there. The 300 Norma in this little gang here, this is sort of the gang that it's really sort of being compared with in a fashion. I say in a fashion because in no level, none of the cartridges I shoot are set up in with factory loads or with running a factory round. All running heavy bullets and trying to run the 250 grain bullet and sort of finding where they sit and where they suit. At the moment, we've tested the 300 Win Mag we've been using for a long time. The 300 PRC, we sort of compared them alongside each other and working out the differences there. We got the 300 Rum. These are actually set up, both of these two in this shot here, they're set up with the 230 grain projectiles, but I tested those with the 230 Hornady A-tips and the 250 Hornady A-tips. Those are the 230 Burgers, which I really like and have used for a long time. The Rum here's got the 250 grain A-tip, which started to perform really well. Only got a little tiny bit of testing in a very similar setup to this. It's a Krieger barrel It's actually the Remington 700 long action in a GCPD chassis, but a factory setup like that. Similar sort of fore-end, similar bits and pieces.
Smack in the center.
But that shot really well, and we just started to get some R&D with it. This now, the Norma has got the bullets I want to be using this season, which are the 245 grain Burgers. The Extreme Outer Limit 245 grain hunting projectile from Burger. Really good looking bullet. And we'll see, I've got to compare those two. We'll do that sort of stuff. We're going to compare the 245 and the 250 A-tip, see what their actual efficiencies, what their actual BCs, what they actually perform like, all that sort of stuff, what their consistency, which induces accuracy, is going to compare like, all that sort of stuff. But I suppose I'm testing the 300 Norma to see how it really performs. So that's its amount of power it gets with the brass working, all that sort of stuff. So the sort of speed I can get out of the bullet is what I'm actually talking about when I'm saying efficiencies on that score. So at the moment I've started, my base load started above where I finish. So we're in the well, I suppose I'm not going to go into the finer details of powder loads at this level of things, just in the way of on the YouTube side of it. But I've started in and got a range going through the mid-80s is what we're talking about. So as for where we start and where we finish up, that stuff maybe later on, but we've got a base load, then 2 grains up, then 2 grains up, then 2 grains up, then 2 grains up, just to see where we're at. We haven't quite come up to where we ended up running the rum, but we're getting close to it. And at the moment, that's all I can tell you. All I've done is what I do in the first levels of finding out the pressure where things are happy at. And I'll put on images there, as you can see what we've actually got, where what it ran like in the base one. And what we're really looking at when you look at that one there is just the shoulder of the primer. Then the next one up, and the next one up, and you go through, you see that shoulder start to tighten up, and then we end up at the top there, where in actual fact that doesn't look too bad. It hasn't cornered off to where it's a sharp edge. It's still got a reasonable roll to it, and I've got a feeling that might be the edge of things. You'll tend to find other things, from brass sticking to other things happening once we're getting up there, but we'll see. We'll see how this thing's producing its how it actually performs at that level. Now I have also immediately gone and pushed the lands forward. So it was chambered, and then that was a reasonable sort of length sort of cartridge. I think that would have run a maximum of 83 millimeters. I think it was, no, 93 millimeters in an overall length with the 245 grain Burgers. So it was decent length. I've pushed it forward from there in looking at where the bullet lined up with the neck of the case, that I could go a little bit forward. I really wanted to do it in one hit and then give myself some room to move where I'm moving forward or back, checking out jumps, but make sure I can make it happen even if I want to run very little jump back in the 5 or 10 thou or something like that. But probably planning to run more in the 20 to 30 to 40 or even 50 thou jump, in the way of trying to give myself essentially a little bit more freebore for a little bit more speed. And with the modern hybrid bullet, accuracy isn't going to suffer in that place. We'll see, got testing to do. Maybe I've gone a step too far with what I've done. Once again, those are the finer details that we may share at later place, but the actual length of it, yes, we've pushed it forward, just thrown it a little bit further forward with a 1 degree reamer. For what I'm actually talking about, the finer details of working at chambering, I've done a whole video on that, which goes through and shows what I'm basically doing to work out my load with my bullet, to work out what I want to do with the chamber side of things, but that's it. Besides that, it's a match ream, so it's set up, or match reamer, so it's set up for a standard 300 Norma case, which is what I'm testing. And yes, we could go with improved cases, improved chambers and that sort of stuff. This is just a test on that 300 Norma to see how it performs. At the moment, from what I've heard, guys who start to push them at all with a heavy bullet start to have case sticking issues or brass life issues. And that also ends up in case sticking. We'll see what we've done. I'm sort of allowing for that with running a little more freeboard to try and keep my pressure down and keep the speeds up with decent pressure and all that sort of stuff, but we'll see. So as you can see, that's my first level of what I've done there. And in looking at those two, I think that somewhere between the top load I tried then and the 1 and 2 grains down is roughly where it's going to be. And I suppose for the next bit of the exercise, that gives me an idea. I now know I can load them up and start to run them, and I'll make my mind up whether I'm going to run the second one from the top or the top. That's something I'll make a decision on the day, load those up and then go out and run them and see how they perform. First firing is relevant. Really, it's the second and third that you'll start to see stuff. You might get a little clue with bolt and that sort of stuff as you go through with brand new virgin brass, but I tend to find it's in the second or third firing that all of a sudden it'll show what it really is. But we'll see. At the moment, we're right up there. It's not quite in the place of the rum. It may end up in that place, but of course that's just the powder. I haven't done any speed, I haven't done any efficiencies. We might find that because of the shorter, fatter nature of that case that we're going to see more speed versus the amount of powder. So it's going to be competitive or above. From what I've seen with the heavy bullet, that doesn't tend to factor in. It doesn't tend to work quite like that. But we'll see. This is getting into the bigger stuff. This is 30 cal. Really keen to see how it all happens. So anyway, that's the test. That's the stage we're at the moment. We've probably got a few weeks before we're going to get out and actually test it. We can get into the paddocks and actually test things properly at decent range. Might do a little bit in between to test a little bit more on that sort of stuff, but time poor, working pretty hard to try and make it all happen. So we try and make get as much done as we can with every time we go out. So that's that bit of it. The rest of the rifle setup, listen, I'm happy with the whole lot. Like I said, there was lots of work in getting, especially machining out and getting this action down to get it all centered in here. Really, one, I suppose it's a little bit about aesthetics. What it was really about was trying to design this so it could take on the big structured barrel from Takom, which means it needs to be dead centered inside this tube in the front end. And yes, I could have gone with an open exposed chassis underneath here and left it to where it didn't really matter. You could just let it all set up. I really wanted to get it the best of the way I do things, to test things as thoroughly as possible. The other nature of that is it lowered the centre line into this action, which works nicely for transferring all that load straight back to the shoulder, in my logic of trying to keep that load as straight as possible, to keep the rifle motion as straight as possible. In the same bracket, the barrel, it's a full straight, like I said, 30 inch, I think it's just over 30 inch actually, in a 1.25 inch barrel, so straight all the way through. My muzzle brake on the front here is set up where it's only on with low tension. If I wind that forward a little bit, you'll see what I'm talking about in thread. I have a full big thread on the front there. So it's my new design of muzzle brakes. They are there, you can get these. They're designed so that, as you can see, there is going to be no thread distortion. Yep, thread distortion with the blast at the end there, because that barrel is at full strength, the absolute best way you could do it. Also just tapered these down a little bit. Nothing other than aesthetics. Because it starts at 1.25 inch, it ends up where they have a really big square block front to them. So by tapering it down, I'm not hurting my efficiency of the brake at all, but just taking away a little bit of that big ugly front profile of having too much of a big block on the front there. Well, I think it's where they get a bit blocky like that. I prefer to pull it down, make it a little bit nicer. Side profile, nice and trim with the standard square on the top of it. I think that's about it. Like I said, I want to run it. There's a little bit of, even though I've gone through and I've started the bedding process and things, I now actually want to go and shoot it and make sure everything functions properly, from welds to how it all is settling in the bedding side of things. And I'll do the final bedding once it's actually run 100 rounds or 150 rounds or something, that to make sure I've got that exactly where I want it to. Big process in going through and building up the insides of this. There may be a bit of settling, even though it's aluminium and it's bedded and all the rest of it, there may be a bit of settling, so I want to do that before I finish things. So the other bit I've got is another thing that I've finished, which will be tested in this platform as well. As I said, I've got my Nightforce 7x35 on the top here, set up in the normal fashion I do. Now this will run the 5x25 as well. I really swap scopes over all the time with what I'm up to. But what I do have in the normal setup is the air attack base. So for those who don't realise, this combination with this adjustable piece all zeroed, the scope will be zeroed at 100 yards and I'll be able to get a full 100 minutes. Well, actually, I can get 120 minutes of elevation out of all my attacker scopes. little more complicated on the 7x35, but yes, 120 minutes of elevation I'll be able to dial up by having the 60 MOA base on it. So that's the starting place. Then I actually have 70 MOA that I can dial on here in 10 units of 10, but I'll be able to dial this up to 190 minutes. So that's probably getting this combination, we'll see how that all runs, but probably getting it out to the 2,500, 2,700 yards is where that will go to. No, probably even a bit further, that neck of the woods, but getting out there. What I've also done, and I've got, is a couple of different options. Now, there is the Charlie Chirac unit, which the way I do it, I'll just get inside here. Charlie Chirac unit, which for me, I swap over the sunshade to put this sunshade on, so the clamp on it, and then that unit there clamps on the front. There's actually some bolts and some little arms to stop it all rotating, but that there is the Charlie Chirac unit, which means that then you've got 400 minutes of elevation if you want to go there, in a way of being able to dial up with this unit. Great system that we've got to use the option of, but there's a halfway option I've got there now as well. And that is, let's put that little box away. That is this unit here, the Night Force wedge. Now this is made to use in the way it's designed to be used. If I modify this, put a rail on the front here, then I can put that on the front, and it's set up to where this one is 100 MOA. They get 50 MOA, this is 100 MOA, so that can then bolt on the front like that there. So then you've got 100 MOA in the way of clipping on the front. The thing, I like this system, but I wanted an extra thing which it doesn't come with, and what I've done is built my own. This is a little adapter ring I've got, which is made with the threads. I managed to work out the threads, and this will screw into the back of the Night Force wedge. Like that, a little mark on it to make sure it's tight, and then that will fit it up so you can actually see what I'm talking about. You could put it on the front of the sunshade. I'm going to really probably run them like this, but then that's designed to be able to, very carefully, very fine threads, come on, so as simple as that, whether that's onto the sunshade or that's onto wherever you're putting it. Okay, so put it onto there, put that back onto there. These are generally obviously locked up with a little spanner up to your correct settings. I've made a little bracket on the bottom here that has a little bubble level, so I can very simply, when I get it right, center that, and I've got a lock nut. There we go. Whoops. There we go. So on there, so that's all centered and done. So that has, I'll pop that sunshade up. That is all there in a form where I now have dialed in 100 minutes of elevation, 120 minutes of elevation, 220 minutes of elevation there. With a little bit more height, I could obviously tilt that forward and take this combination up to nearly 300 minutes of elevation. But it's just the process I've gone through. Obviously, with a bit more clearance, you can just spin that on the front. In this combination, it needs to do that. I need to pop the scoper to be able to screw that in and out. But it gives me that choice of where I've got a pretty big rig in the way of being able to shoot a long way in one rifle and one combination. As for my little screw-on piece on the front here, took me a little bit to work out those threads. I've got to see how it goes with whether I actually run that a bit tighter and leave that attached to the unit all the time rather than screwing it on and off. I wanted to show it in a separate format so you can see what it actually is. It's not something that's going to market at this stage. I want to do a bit of R&D with it and make sure I'm not going to have any issues with threads or that sort of stuff. I've got to work out whether I should be running those threads dry or putting a bit of moly lube on there to make sure that you don't get any galling or growling or anything. Got to make sure that things stay stable when you're shooting. Really, there's no reason for anything to twist with that sort of stuff. I've made this little bubble level on the front here, so you can always check between your bubble levels you've got something neat and tidy, and whether I turn it into a bubble level that's somewhere else so it's easy to see from behind as the shooter. These are all details I've got to get into, but at the moment I've got my threads, I've got a system that works, it's attached to the front of the scope, so that's the same way as I run the Charlie. It obviously has a lot less weight. It doesn't have the advantage of the extra elevation of your point of view to look over your mirror, look over your barrel mirage and get over your muzzle. So it really is probably a 200, 250 MOA unit in total combination to use where it's actually going to work with a normal rifle. But we'll see. Like I said, I've got some R&D to do. I've got it on the front. I want to go out and do some tests in that stuff, which is quite commonly in the 3,000 yards, 300 meter stuff. A lot of the smaller rifles using on about the 200 minutes of elevation. I think for the average guy who's got themselves with their rig got 120 minutes usable on their scope, to be able to put that on the front, it's probably going to work really nicely. And being able to just put it on the front, especially on your normal rifle with an open barrel, having a screw-on thing, I think is an option I certainly wanted to see. So that's why I put in the yards to build something, and we'll go and test it. But anyway, I'm pretty excited. That's a really nice little thing. This is the round in the 300 Norma, so really looking forward to doing that. Yeah, we'll see. At the moment, that was I'd put in enough to where I thought I was going to be over-pressuring, probably not before I got to the top. At this stage, it looks like it might even be able to run a little bit more, and it's really already says to me, okay, it is what you'd expect. It's going to be a good hunk above the 300 in the way of performance, and that's not above in everything, but in the way of performance, in the way of its actual horsepower, how fast it can make a big bullet run, would appear at this stage to be well above the PRC, above the Win Mag, and the Win Mag was a bit of the winner in that race there, just in the heavy bullet side of things, not in the 220s and lower, just in the 230s and above, it was the winner. As to whether it comes up and is competitive with the Rum, I think the Rum is a really good setup. As to whether it's in front of that or behind that, that's what this season is going to show, but really looking forward to it. And I suppose the big picture is we now have a piece to work with. The guys at Barnard really helped us out with this. Awesome action. I've got 3 of them now. I do like them. I've got it in my 50 BMG. So the 50 BMG 416 rifle is running the Barnard in the big fella. We've got it in our ELR rifle, or our ULR rifle, so 375 Gibbs is running one of these. This is now, we've got one in the PL, which is the pull bolt face. This is a little bit different. I think it'll suit me really nicely with the right-hand bolt, left-hand port, left-hand feed. Quite used to having my magazine over to that side, so works nicely on that sort of score. Beautiful trigger. Yeah, really looking forward to it. And listen, a lot of work. I wouldn't take it on. I wouldn't recommend it in the way of trying to take something like this chassis system and modify it into it. Be nicer to start with something a little friendlier, to not have to modify so much, taking one platform and trying to push it into a shape of another platform. But end result, at this stage at least, I'm super happy with it. It looks $1 million. It feels really good. It's got nice form. Gareth does really good work in the way he designs bits and pieces. I've had to take metal out in lots of places. I don't think I've structurally changed anything in the way I've designed it, in the way I've done that. And listen, I have to put it back in. Like I did over here, there was, if you saw the original pictures, there was action or machining here for where the bolt was going, which is well forward. I didn't use resin or anything. I filled that up completely with aluminium weld, so welded all that. That's all solid again now, and then moved it to a different place. So if I have to do the same where I've weakened things otherwise, I can do. But the feel of it, what it looked like, the 4 shots or 5 shots I had with it, felt solid as a rock. And like I said, nice low center. Everything looks really good. Really looking forward to getting out and giving this thing a run. Okay, well that's about an overview of this for the moment. And keep in mind, guys, this is a build we've done for the channel to do testing for the channel. So we really could use your support. If you're capable of offering us some financial donations or support, there's a couple of ways to do that sort of stuff. You can go to the 4AW icon. That'll take you to our channel page. In the banner on the channel page, there's a PayPal link. If you go to that, you'll see there's a couple of ways that you can donate to us, whether it's monthly or just a one-off donation. You can also go to our web store, our 4AW web store. That has all our components, our bag riders, our bag bases, the muzzle brakes and that sort of stuff that you can purchase there. We also have the option of buying support bits there. So if you're interested or you're willing or capable to help us, it would really great. We don't get any support from, very, very little from YouTube. Advertising isn't something that is that they like to do for us. In saying that, I suppose I'd also say I don't like watching videos with lots of adverts on them either. So I think it's sort of, I'm not pushing too hard down that road. I think it's sort of, I try and keep that, limit it. I really don't have much of a choice. But even when I do have the option when they say I can, I'm only doing partial advertising because I think adverts everywhere suck. So I stay away from it a little bit. But that's also to our detriment. So if you can help us, even if it's a little bit, whatever you can would really help. We'd really like to stay doing this sort of stuff. We'd like to bring more of this stuff here. On there, for the guys who do that in a proper sense, that is the only way that we can offer the other tidbits of information that go with the builds. This concept started in a support a build thing. That didn't really work, bad timing and all that sort of stuff, but that's the extra we can offer for people that buy a full bit and can actually help us in that sort of level. Then, you know, there's other bits of information you're chasing to help with your build, that sort of stuff. Then that's the way to get that sort of information. There's only a certain amount I can share on that sort of stuff. I have to be careful and tread into it, but that's where we can help in some form. I think that's about it. Thank you very much for checking in. Drop a line with any comments or questions. Give it a like, give it a thumbs up, share the video, help us out in that score, and yeah, we'll catch you next time.